driving in California. It was the middle of the night and there was so much fog, I just couldn't see the road. But fortunately, in California, they put these little reflectors on the side of the road, and they put them on the lines for the freeway, so they put them there. They don't have snow plows, so they stay there. And that's actually how I stayed on the road. I just went really slowly and just stayed within those reflectors. Another time, another state, I was on the highway again, and this time there was a whiteout. So it was Ohio. And again, I couldn't see where I was going. As I think most of us have had that situation where all you can see is what's right in front of you. And fortunately in Ohio, I think they do this in Minnesota, also on the side of the highway, they have those bumps, those little grooves in the ground, so that I would just put my tire on there and I'd follow it, hoping that I wasn't going too far to the right. And that's how I followed the road until I found the exit at last. As you graduates set out on your various roads in the next phase of your life, you're going to find yourself moving at times through your own version of fog and whiteouts. With so much emphasis in our education and sports and life in general on being leaders and being strong leaders and developing our leadership skills, I thought it was important to talk about the importance of being a follower, a good follower. And I think that it's perhaps more challenging, more difficult, and even more important to you as an individual and to the world in general to learn how to be and to appreciate being a good follower. There are at least two basic types of followers. There's the blind follower, who rarely thinks about what he or she is doing and just kind of keeps going. And there's the informed follower, the one who has a leader, who has leaders, and follows those, but really keeps within themselves the capacity to think about what they're doing and whether the decisions they're following are the right decisions for them. When we moved to Minnesota, I know I've told members of this church about our 5 days in the boundary water. Some people who we didn't really know invited us to go, and they promised that they had been there before. So 4 of us in our family entrusted our life to them as we set out for the boundary water. And it was awesome. You know, being a minister, being a parent, you're always in charge of something, and so it was really lovely to be someplace and to let someone else take responsibility for what was happening. But following is not for the faint of heart. My niece, who just had her first child, and so has grown out of this, but when she was in high school or college, she went to a party with her friends. There were no parents there. There was a beer keg there. And when my brother went to pick her up at the jail, she said, well, you know, I didn't think it was really a bad thing. I didn't really drink that much. Well, I think some of you, those of you going off to college, are going to have that challenge also, you know. We have to watch who we follow because it has implications for our lives also. Following is not for the faint of heart. It's easy to point our finger at leaders and to say it is the president's responsibility, it's the governor's fault, it's whoever, you know, the president of my company, the minister, it's world leaders. It's easy to do that. But you know, all those terrible things that happen, all those challenging things that happen not just because they're bad leaders, but also because there are followers who went along with those bad leaders. And sometimes those followers are us. At the same time, the world is redeemed and changed and transformed by good followers. There's this wonderful story of this village in La Chambron-du-Lignon in France. During World War II, the minister there, or the priest, decided to kind of help his congregation or that village hide German Jews. And so they made them members of their family, so when the Nazis came to try to figure out who was who, they just said, there's no Jews here, these are members of our family, and it worked. There's a children's storybook about this. Repeatedly, those followers put their lives on the line, protecting people, because they trusted a leader who was a good leader. Every time we act as good followers to good leaders, we help redeem the world. And every time we act as not so good followers to not so good leaders, we help to confuse the world and to make it a more difficult place for a lot of people. So my question to the three of you as you go on to college is, who or what will you follow? As Christians, I hope that you will always try, first and foremost, to see Jesus as your leader. Jesus and his teachings as the yardstick against which you judge the things that you do, the knowledge that you gain, the decisions that you make. It doesn't mean that everything in your life has to be serious, but to the best of your ability, everything in your life should be done with love, compassion, and even self-sacrifice. Which brings us to the question of what kind of follower will you be? Jesus said to follow him we have to do two things: to love God above everything else and to love our neighbor as ourselves. A long time after that, Shakespeare wrote in Hamlet, "To thine own self be true." When you love God above everything else, you are true to yourself, to your being, and to that of your neighbor. When you are true to yourself and to your neighbor, you are true to God. To be true means to be in harmony, to be at one. It is that balance that you feel when you're playing your sport and you hit the ball or you kick the ball and you know that you are just in sync and it all works perfectly. To be at one, to be at harmony, to be at true to yourself is to be balanced. Be a good follower who is true to your God and to yourself. You know what's right and wrong. Sometimes that will be confusing. You know what is healthy and what is not healthy. It's not always easy to do the right thing, and we are often put in circumstances in which we are pulled to do things that we know aren't quite right for us. The Apostle Paul said it so well. "I do not do what I want, but the evil I do not want is what I do." Very often we find ourselves in a circumstance like that. So I charge you to be a good follower, to be true to God, to your neighbor, and to yourself. Every good follower cannot possibly be true to himself or herself all the time. A good follower will mess up. And when that happens, I just invite you to admit it. Assume whatever responsibility is yours. Expect and accept the consequences, and always know that God loves you, that God forgives you, and that you always have a second and a third and a fourth and a fifth chance. Sometimes following Jesus is a lot like driving in the fog or in a whiteout. You know God's there, and every now and then you get a glimpse of God and you have a sense of that Spirit that's kind of leading you and guiding you. But for the most part, you make it through by the light reflected on the street, by the bumps in the road, by the sound of those things around you, by the small and seemingly insignificant things you take for granted that are meant to save your life. So move on into your future now, and in all things follow truth, follow love, follow your heart. But first and foremost, love God, love your neighbor, and love yourself. And remember, wherever you go, you are not alone. God is indeed with you in the faces and hearts of the people who love you, your parents, your family, your church here, the new friends you will meet, and the people who love you and who will support you, and in the good decisions that you will make as informed and responsible followers. Go in peace, go in love, go in grace.